I never thought betrayal could wear a smile so sweet. It wasn't the kind of thing you see coming, not when you trust the people closest to you. That night, the house was filled with laughter, the warm hum of family gathered under one roof for the holidays. I remember the way my husband leaned against the kitchen counter, his eyes crinkling at the corners as he chatted with his nephew. They seemed so close, like brothers more than uncle and nephew. But as the night stretched on and the wine flowed freely, something shifted. A look. A touch too casual to be innocent. And when my husband suggested I keep him company for a while, his voice light but his gaze unreadable, I laughed it off. I should have known then that the cracks in our marriage ran deeper than I'd ever imagined. My name is Elena, and for the last 10 years, I've been married to Marcus. On the surface, our marriage was solid, two people who had built a life together brick by brick. We had our share of fights, like any couple, but they were fleeting, the kind you brush off after a few hours. Marcus was the kind of man who commanded attention, tall, with broad shoulders and an easy smile that made people feel instantly at ease. I loved him fiercely, though, if I'm honest. That love had started to feel like a well-worn sweater, comfortable, familiar, but lacking its original warmth. Then there was David, Marcus's nephew. At 25, he was 15 years younger than Marcus and barely 6 years younger than me. He had just moved to the city for a new job, and Marcus had insisted he stay with us for a while to get on his feet. David was charming in a way that felt both innocent and calculated, his laughter always a little too perfect, his compliments just shy of flirtatious. He had Marcus's same easy charisma, but packaged in youthful exuberance, the kind that made you remember what it felt like to be noticed. Our home became a little livelier with David around. He was always quick with a joke, always eager to help. I found myself smiling more, laughing at things I didn't think were funny. It felt harmless at first. The night everything shifted was a holiday dinner. The dining room was warm, bathed in the golden glow of candlelight. The smell of roasted turkey and cinnamon lingered in the air, mingling with the faint woodsy scent of Marcus's cologne. The sound of glasses clinking and the rise and fall of overlapping conversations filled the room. I remember glancing across the table and catching David's eyes on me. He didn't look away, and for a moment I didn't either. After dinner, Marcus poured another round of wine. "You two seem to get along well," he said, his voice playful. His comment made me pause, my fork hovering above my plate. "Elena, why don't you keep David company while I clean up?" It sounded innocent enough, but there was something in the way he said it, a strange edge to his voice. David smirked, his dimples deepening, and I felt a flicker of something I couldn't quite name. I laughed to diffuse the tension, but Marcus didn't join in. Looking back, I should have asked more questions. I should have pushed back. Instead, I nodded, letting the moment pass, not knowing how much it would cost me. Marcus handed me the wine glass with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Don't let him bore you too much," he teased, clinking his glass with David's. David chuckled, leaning back in his chair. "Bore her?
Me?
Never." I forced a laugh, but something about the exchange felt off. Marcus was usually the jealous type, always the one to hover too close if another man so much as complimented me. Yet now, he seemed almost amused, as though he were in on some private joke I didn't understand. David followed me into the living room, where the fire crackled softly, casting flickering shadows on the walls. The rest of the family had retreated to other corners of the house, leaving the two of us in an odd pocket of isolation. I sat on the couch, tucking my legs beneath me, and sipped my wine, suddenly hyper-aware of David's presence. "You're tense," he said, his voice low. I looked at him, startled. "I'm not tense." "You are," he insisted, his gaze steady, a small smile playing at his lips. "You keep rubbing your neck like this." He mimicked the motion, and I realized he was right. I had been doing that without noticing. "Habit, I guess," I said lightly, trying to brush it off. He didn't let it go. "You're always doing things like that. Little tells." Excuse me? David leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his glass dangling from one hand. I've been here for 3 months, Elena. I notice things, like how you bite your lip when you're thinking, or how you tap your fingers when you're anxious. Marcus doesn't see it, does he? His words hit me harder than I wanted to admit. I felt a flush rise to my cheeks and quickly looked away. You're reading too much into nothing, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. Am I? He asked, his voice soft but insistent. The silence between us grew heavy, pressing down like a weight. I could hear Marcus in the kitchen, the faint clink of dishes and running water. For a moment, I wanted to call out to him, to break whatever was happening here. But I didn't. Instead, I stood abruptly, setting my glass on the coffee table. I think I'm going to help Marcus. Before I could move, David grabbed my wrist, not harshly, but firm enough to make me freeze. Why do you stay with him? What? He let go, his eyes searching mine. You're not happy, Elena. Anyone can see it. So why stay? I felt my throat tighten. That's none of your business. Maybe not. But I see the way he looks at you. Or rather, the way he doesn't. You deserve more than that. His words echoed in my head, uncomfortably close to thoughts I'd buried deep. I pulled my wrist away, my heart pounding. You don't know what you're talking about. I know enough, he said simply. I walked into the kitchen, where Marcus was drying a wine glass, humming softly to himself. He looked up as I entered, his expression calm, almost smug. Everything okay? He asked, as if he already knew the answer. Fine, I said, my voice tight. His eyes flicked toward the living room. David behaving himself? What kind of question is that? I snapped, more defensive than I meant to be. Marcus shrugged, setting the glass down. Just making sure. You know how he is. I stared at him, my chest tightening. What exactly are you trying to say, Marcus? He turned to face me fully, his expression unreadable. I'm saying you seem different lately. Restless. Like maybe you need a distraction? The words hung in the air between us, heavy and loaded. I felt like the ground had shifted beneath my feet. What the hell is that supposed to mean? It means, he said calmly, that maybe I've been thinking about what you need. What we need. And maybe it's not as traditional as you think. The realization hit me like a punch to the stomach. This wasn't just about David's flirtation or Marcus's strange behavior. It was bigger than that, something darker, something I wasn't ready to face. I don't understand you, I whispered, my voice shaking. Marcus stepped closer, his tone eerily gentle. You will, Elena. You just need to let go a little. I backed away, my pulse racing. In the living room, I could see David watching us from the corner of his eye, his expression unreadable. Suddenly, the house felt suffocating, the air too thick to breathe. Doubts and fears swirled in my mind. Was this a game to Marcus? A test? And why did David's gaze feel more like a challenge than concern? My marriage, my sense of self, everything felt like it was teetering on the edge of something I couldn't name. That night, after the rest of the family had gone to bed, Marcus came to me in the living room. I was sitting by the dying fire, staring into the embers as though they held answers I couldn't find anywhere else. The weight of David's words and Marcus's unsettling behavior pressed down on me, a suffocating presence I couldn't escape. Marcus sat down beside me, close but not touching. He swirled the last of his whiskey in the glass, his gaze fixed on the swirling liquid as he spoke. You've been unhappy for a while now, haven't you? The question caught me off guard. I turned to him, searching his face for some hint of where this was going. What makes you say that? He sighed, his expression softening in a way I hadn't seen in years. I'm not blind, Elena. I see the way you look at me, or don't. I see the way you light up when David's around. It's not your fault. We've been stuck, and I don't think either of us knows how to fix it. Marcus, what are you talking about? My voice cracked, betraying the storm of emotions churning inside me. He finally looked at me, his eyes steady and calm, as though he had already made peace with what he was about to say. I've been thinking maybe we need something different. A reset. Something to shake us out of this rut. What do you mean? I whispered, though part of me already knew. His next words came out slow, deliberate. I talked to David. About us. About how maybe you need someone who can make you feel alive again. And he agreed. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. My heart thudded in my chest, and the room tilted slightly, like the ground had shifted beneath me. You talked to David? About me? About us? Yes. Marcus's voice was calm, almost eerily so. He understands. He's young, Stop. My voice was sharper than I intended, slicing through his words like a knife. I stood abruptly, pacing the room as my mind raced. You're telling me you what? Set this up? Offered me to him like some twisted gift. Elena, you're overreacting, Marcus said, his tone infuriatingly level. I was trying to help. To give you something I clearly can't anymore. How could you think this is okay? I demanded, my voice rising. You're my husband, Marcus. What happened to loyalty? To love? He stood now, setting his glass down with a sharp clink. I do love you. That's why I'm doing this. Do you think it's easy for me to admit I've failed you? That I can't make you happy anymore? I'm trying to save what we have before it's too late. Tears burned in my eyes as his words sank in. And you think the answer is, what? Letting your nephew, I couldn't even finish the sentence. It's not just about him, Marcus said, his voice softening again. It's about us. About breaking free of the expectations that are suffocating us. You thought wrong, I snapped, cutting him off. My chest ached, my throat tightening as emotions I could barely name surged to the surface. Betrayal, anger, heartbreak, confusion. From the corner of my eye, I saw David standing in the doorway, silent and watchful. His presence only added fuel to the fire burning inside me. Did you know about this? I demanded, rounding on him. David's face was unreadable, his voice low. Marcus told me. He said it was your decision. That if you wanted. Stop, I said again, shaking my head. Both of you. Just stop. I turned back to Marcus, my voice trembling as I spoke. Do you even realize what you've done? You've taken everything I thought I knew about us and twisted it into something I don't even recognize. How am I supposed to come back from this? Marcus's face fell, the confidence draining from him as he reached for me. Elena. No, I stepped back, my voice firm despite the tears streaming down my face. You don't get to justify this. You don't get to make decisions for me. I trusted you, Marcus. And you destroyed that. The silence that followed was deafening, the weight of his betrayal settling between us like an insurmountable wall. For the first time in my life, I truly didn't know if our marriage could survive. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the living room, staring at the fading embers in the fireplace, replaying Marcus's words over and over in my mind. The betrayal wasn't in the act itself. It was in the way he had stripped me of my agency, deciding what I needed without ever asking me. He thought he was saving us, but all he'd done was expose the rot that had been growing silently between us for years. By the time dawn broke, soft light filtering through the curtains, I had made my decision. Marcus found me still sitting there, his face etched with exhaustion and regret. Elena, he began, but I held up a hand to stop him. There's nothing you can say right now that will fix this, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You took something sacred and turned it into a transaction. I can't unhear what you said, Marcus. I can't unsee it. He nodded slowly, his shoulders sagging under the weight of my words. I thought I was doing the right thing. I laughed bitterly, the sound hollow. The right thing? For who? For you? For David? Because it sure as hell wasn't for me. David stayed silent, lingering in the doorway like a shadow. I didn't look at him. I couldn't. By the afternoon, I had packed a bag and walked out the door. Marcus didn't try to stop me. Maybe he knew it was pointless. Maybe he knew I needed space to figure out if there was anything left to salvage. In the weeks that followed, I found myself replaying every moment of our marriage, searching for the cracks I had ignored. Was this who Marcus had always been, or had we both simply drifted so far from the people we used to be that neither of us recognized the other anymore? There are no easy answers, no neat endings. Love isn't always enough, and sometimes the people who promise to protect you end up causing the deepest wounds. As I sat in a quiet cafe one afternoon, sipping coffee and staring out at the bustling world outside, I realized something. This wasn't just the end of my marriage. It was the beginning of something else, something I didn't yet understand but was determined to face on my own terms. Because love, I've learned, should never come at the expense of your dignity. And trust, once broken, may never truly heal.